Today we will talk about the Aegean Sea dispute. Now, the Aegean Sea dispute is between Turkey and Greece, and it is based on the territorial limits of both Turkey and Greece claims on the entirety of the sea. Now, Turkey, post its World War I defeat, was basically divided by the Allied powers. They divided it in this manner, where basically from 1919 to 1924, the Greek the Greek people basically ruled the entire sea. The entire sea was basically under their control because they owned parts of the Anatolian province. They owned parts of the Turkish part that is in Europe. They got all those parts, and with that, they got all the islands with Greek population on them. And basically, for till 1924, they had complete sovereignty over that entirety of the sea. Now, post 1924, Turkey got its territories back. It got its independence. We saw the Turkish fight for the independence, the Greco-Turk War, and we also witnessed the new treaty that was signed in 1924. Now, the dispute arose because in 1936, Greece passed the September Act, and with that stretched its nautical miles to six nautical miles. And with that stretched, the Aegean Sea was basically divided in this manner, where it went to basically 43.5% of it came under the direct territorial limit of Greece. This was seen as a massive step for Turkey because basically half the sea was now the territorial sovereign territory of Greece. Now, if you would actually look at this map over here, you would see the slow territorial evolution of Greece and how they began to dominate the Aegean Sea. And if you notice over there, you would see that by 1919 to 1920, they had basically completely dominated the sea. They got its entire parts on it. They got its entirety of it. They got the entire islands. They got the maritime bases in Turkey, in Anatolia, in Europe. The entire sea was basically completely taken over by Greece. But later on, as I told you, that with Turkey reclaiming those territories, retaking those territories, and pushing the Greeks out, it created a bit of a problem. Turkey now had complete control of its Anatolian territory. However, the Greeks had the control of the Aegean Sea and all those islands over there. Now, if you would actually look at this map over here, you would see that the Aegean Sea is basically divided into a lot of rock formations, small islands, rock formations. It is basically even if you would see down there, you would see a rock formative boundary over there as well. And if you would notice over here, we would see that it is a form of semi-enclosed sea, and this is very important. And Turkey basically bases its entire claims on it. Now, with that, in its 6 nautical miles, after the 6 nautical miles thing, in 1995, the Turkish Grand Assembly passed a resolution that if Greece would increase those nautical miles to even one more, or would try to fulfill its entirety of its claims, which is basically 12 nautical miles allotted to each country, then that would be a casus belli for war. Turkey fully, openly declared that it would go to war if Greece would extend any more influence on the Aegean Sea dispute. Now, most of those islands are under the occupation of Greece, but this entire dispute can be centered around these concepts: that there's a problem with delimitation, there is a problem with the continental shelf, there's a problem with the flying rights, and there's a problem with who owns how many islands, because that entire delimitation is being disputed. Now, Turkey basically sees the Aegean Sea basically sees it as a wall. It sees that if Greece was allowed to militarize those islands, it would completely contain Turkey. Turkey wants half of those islands to be made into a gray zone. It wants them to be demilitarized, and it wants itself to be able to reach the Mediterranean. Now, one of the major problems over here is that in international law, you are allowed right of passage. That is allowed indeed. However, military vessels are not allowed. Not allowed without proper permission, and especially if the conditions are bad, or if the situation and the relationships are down, they could be stopped even. So in this case, Turkey sees that its entire strategic hold in the Mediterranean is completely under great threat if Greece would extend its influence. Now, if you would see this map here, you see this is its map with those three nautical lines, and then we have its map over here. If you would see it over here, that you would see that influence is really less. This was before its 1936 declaration. We would see most of the sea is open. Most of it is open. With 6 nautical miles, it became 43.5%, as can be seen over here. You see, if you actually notice it, you would see that the influence is finally gaining ground. It is starting up. It is starting up. And now, if you look at this image, you would see that with 12 nautical miles, it becomes huge. You would see most of the sea is being covered by Greece influence. You see, in nautical miles, that's the sovereign territory. That's the territory you can hold, you can stop, you can do whatever you want with that territory. You see, although there are of course exceptions, there's law of sea, which I will get to right now, a couple of minutes. However, I want to highlight that the nautical miles are the extension of your territory, and no other power can do anything on it without your consent. Now, if you would see the 12 nautical miles map, you would see that most of it is entirely covered. You see that basically Turkey is completely enclosed. Now, if Greece pushes its claims, Turkey would be enclosed. It would be so heavily enclosed that it would struggle to even keep its influence in Cyprus, the Turkic Cyprus. Now, another problem that we would witness over here is that the continental shelf itself is also contested. Of course, it is contested. You see, Turkey claims that the continental shelf should be part of the Anatolian lines and the Anatolian peninsula, and it basically sees it as an extension of its own continent. Now, Greece, on the other hand, says that the continental shelf belongs to those islands, and those islands should have the rights to dig for natural gases or oil reserves or anything like that. And they say that the frontier must be defined by the median line in accordance to the convention of the continental shelf. Turkey states that the condition of the sea is so special that normally such seas are very rare in the world, and such disputes are very rare in the world, and as per the convention of the shelf, it should not be divided on the median line but should be given its special status. It is covered in Article 6.7, I believe. And Greece, seeing this, actually went to the ICJ. It filed a case. It said to delimit the border, let's see who gets the continental shelf. Turkey refused to accept the jurisdiction of the ICJ, and the International Court of Justice was basically left to declare that it had no jurisdiction and could not competently delimit the border because the other side was not coming. You see, in this manner, we can see that the continental shelf is also heavily being contested, and if you would actually notice the 12 nautical miles area, you would come to an agreement that if it becomes to 12 nautical miles, the entire half, nearly 71%, most of the sea is basically under Greek control. They can drill it, they can do whatever they want with it, and with the EEZ, the entire sea comes under their control. Turkey gets basically 7 to 8% at best, and this can't be allowed. Turkey sees this as a massive hit on its influence. This is basically the history of the dispute and how it is happening. So, looking at this point, in 2009, although the 2019 they declared it, however, the concept was being made about a decade before, and this concept was Mavi Watan, blue homeland. Now, in this blue homeland, Turkey made a proclamation of a 462,000 kilometer square sea line, where it declared that these seas are entirely Turkish territory. This divides the sea in Mavi Watan, it divides the Aegean into half. About, I think, 50 to 60% of it goes to Turkey, where it claims most of those islands that are near Turkey. You see roads over there, you see other islands over there, and all of those are basically now under the claiming of Turkey. In fact, Turkey did also send to UN and the ICJ claimed that we are now claiming these islands. These islands are now ours. If you would come to this map, yep, right here, you would come to see that most of the Aegean is right now under the territory of Greece. However, they don't claim its massive nautical lines. However, when they would, it would become a huge problem. Turkey would be contained. And this is a huge problem with that. You see, this is why they're claiming half of the sea. They're claiming islands like Rhodes, Ikaria, Samos, Chios, Lesbos. All of these islands are being claimed by Turkey. So, in this way, in this manner, we see that the dispute is now becoming more and more complicated. We see that although Mavi Watan may be a political slogan, however, it is also an extension of Turkic strategic influence and its strategic ambitions. Now, here's another aspect. Turkey in 2019 signed a maritime border agreement with Libya, which was heavily contested by both Cyprus and Greece because they highlighted that you don't have a border with Libya. How are you signing a maritime border treaty with them? And Turkey claimed that Mavi Watan states that we are claiming all of these territories. And so, since all of this sea line is ours, we have a border with Libya, and we need to demarcate that. And you see, this battle is becoming so huge, and the dispute is becoming also complicated that it has also taken in the Cyprus dispute because there are resources near the Cyprus Sea, and Turkey is claiming those as well. And Turkey will not allow itself to be boxed in so easily. And this is where we see the dispute become even more complicated. Now, the thing that we need to understand is one of the first things that we need to understand is whether the UN Convention of Law of Sea is it a treaty law or a customary law? Because here's the problem: Turkey has not signed the Law of Sea. It is one of those select few countries that has not signed the Law of Sea. However, Greece has. Greece claims a 12 nautical line based on Convention of Law of Sea. Turkey has not signed it and says that we don't agree to it towards it. So the question we need to first ask is whether UN Convention of Law of Sea is it a customary law that is customary upon all nations, that is legal upon all nations, or is it a treaty law that only those that are signatories to it and those that have ratified it, only those can, only on those it is implementable. So here we need to understand the legal aspects of it. Now, the problem is that international law does not take a superior position in the scope of international world. It is not. It says that we are not the supreme law. In fact, we are basically the more the law, the relationship between countries. You see, because in law there is a massive necessity, which is the existence of a sovereign power that will implement that law, that will act as the deterrent towards those that break the law. But in international world where every nation is meant to be equal, such lack of sovereign power makes international law very different from municipal law, the law that we are governed with in our countries. So here, treaties and customary laws, they make a huge difference. So the question that we have to ask is law of sea applicable on parties that have not signed the agreement? Is Turkey bound to it? Because if it is, then we can bring the argument up. Because here's the thing: when this law of sea, the Convention of Law of Sea was made, it became very clear that this would be the starting point of the law of sea, because it took in many customs that were in place for 500 years, for 600 years, from the olden days. It took in all those customs, and but the problem is Turkey has not signed it. And Article 18 states very clearly that no treaty is binding or creates obligations on third party. So over here we need to look at what the jurists have said in international law. You see, jurists have been trying to figure out what happens to this all important law when those countries that have not signed it, what are they, can they be brought to justice? Can they be taken to the International Court of Justice? So some have stated, and in fact most have stated, that it has ceased to function as just a treaty, and it can now be considered as a customary law on the basis of opinio juris. That so many nations are following the law of sea that it has a customary nature upon it. And Article 38 of the treaty law states that it is obligatory upon states. A customary law is obligatory upon states that aren't party to it. And there are some judgments where courts have treated the UN Convention of Law of Sea as a customary law. This is very important in this dispute because Turkey states that it does not see law of sea as the convention as the law of sea. It has not signed it. It says that it does not implement on them. So the first question is Turkey's stance on this correct? It is not, because at this point the law of sea is now synonymous with the convention of law of sea, and it has now left itself as just a treaty that is only applicable on a handful of countries. It is now a customary law. Now, if we look at some of the cases in international court, we see that the courts have tried to demarcate and decide the law of sea and its relevance, and have been able to, and its equitable relevance. What they've tried to do is they've tried to formulate a system where all parties are happy. Now, in one of the first cases, the international court was forced to decide the law of international strait, right? Whether the coastal nation had any right to it. Can a coastal nation close a strait? In the Corfu Channel case, where the United Kingdom asserted that it has a right to passage through international straits by sending a naval force through the Corfu Channel without complying with Albanian regulations. Albania had basically created regulations that any person that tried to cross the Corfu would require prior authorization. United Kingdom stated that no, it is an international strait. You cannot exert your authority on a strait that is internationally open for everybody. Albania claimed that its sovereignty was being violated, arguing that the Corfu was not an international strait since it was used exclusively for local traffic, and they must find an alternative route. You see, the court rejected the argument, and we need to understand this here. The decisive criterion is rather its geographical situation as connecting the two parts of the high seas and the fact it is being used for international navigation. This is what the court stated. It established that as a matter of customary law, warships and merchant ships had a right of innocent passage through international straits, and this could not be suspended by the coastal state. Now, the reason why I told you this case is because I'm trying to highlight how the law of sea is given such power and precedence that it can even take over the rights, the nautical mile right or the sovereign rights of states. You see, this is very important in this Aegean Sea dispute because we have one nation trying to claim an entire sea for itself. In this manner, we see that the International Court of Justice has highlighted that you can't do that. Now, there was another case in which we can see that international law of sea was basically codified as international law. The delimitation of sea areas, it stated, has always an international aspect, and it cannot be dependent merely upon the will of a coastal state as expressed in its municipal law. Although it's true that the act of delimitation is necessarily a unilateral act because only the coastal state is competent to undertake it, the validity of the delimitation with regard to other states depend upon international law. This is now very important because this internationalized the law of sea. You see, it highlighted that you can't delimit your borders like that. Only international law can govern any form of delimitation. For example, you see, let's say that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia decided that the Arabian Sea will now be split into two. Pakistan will get half of it, and the Arabs would get half of it. They barely have a border with it, but they said, why not? We have a small peak towards it. We can do that. We will go through the Persian Gulf and we'll reclaim the Arabian Sea as well. Or let's change that example. Let's have Yemen over there. Yemen or Qatar or Oman. Let's have Oman. Oman and Pakistan decide to divide the Arabian Sea amongst themselves. Can they delimit it? Nobody else claims the Arabian Sea. Nobody else stood up and said, hey, the Arabian Sea belongs to us. Why are you guys delimiting it? Which, because in territorial law, in land delimitation, this is very easy. Two states claim that this is our land and we are delimiting it. No third party ever came, no problem. But you see, over here, international court decided that it must be governed with international law of sea. And international law of sea and whatever that law of sea states, you can't start delimiting oceans. You must stick to your nautical lines. Now, here's an important aspect. What is the international law of sea? If it is the convention of law of sea, right? So if a state says that it does not exist, will it not exist? Then what is the law of sea? You see, this is where jurists say that it has gained customary existence, because when every other areas, every other judgment, every other institution is saying that we govern international law of sea, we international law of sea is our jurisdiction and you cannot delimit without international law of sea, then what is the international law of sea? The world will say it is the convention of law of sea. Can a nation then say we don't accept it? They can't. That's where it becomes customary. You see, if you don't accept it, then what other law is there? Because that's the law the entire world is following. You see, these judgments basically internationalized the law of sea. They made it away from its treaty effect and made it into a custom. You see, now the international court has also made for baseline delimitation, and this was done in the German-Norwegian dispute and reduced rights of continental shelf. However, we must understand that, and it is very important, that the law of sea, as it grew, the complexities grew, and so did the judgments. And the court also grew in its legal mindset. One of the greatest problems it had to start looking at into was whether an equitable doctrine was to be followed. How was it to be followed? Because you can't just go, oh, like 12 nautical miles to you. You can't be blind to this, because it's going to impede the interest of many nations. So the court has often decided, like it did in Libya versus Malta case, that we must look at things from an equitable side. We must look at equity. You see, what they decided was that this equitable doctrine will be based on equity in law, that it must be fair. So if we look at things from the perspective of equitable doctrine, a single nation taking 70% of the sea, and with EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, claiming basically 100% of the sea, that is not equitable. It does not see that is equitable would be 50-50%. Equitable would be controlled delimitations. Both nations are able to somehow extend their 6 nautical lines and keep a control of it. You see, that's the biggest problem. Now, another problem that we must understand is that in the law of sea, there's a condition. It says that in case the seas are semi-enclosed or enclosed, they must coordinate and cooperate, and no unilateral declaration would be possible over there. For example, you see what this means is, this is covered in Article 122 and 123 of the Law of Sea. What it says is that in those areas where the sea is semi-closed, where it is so close to each other, when nations are so close to each other, then in those seas, a nation cannot have unilateral declaration that 12 nautical miles are now ours. It cannot do that. This is the law of sea. This is the law of sea that Greece itself has signed. And in that, it must work together with the other nation to demilitarize those areas and make sure that the economic activity is done through mutual agreements, mutual treaties, mutual signings, but through peaceful measures. Now, here's the thing. If you would look at the map of the Aegean, you would notice that there's a rock line forming over there. And this is what Turkey claims, that it is semi-enclosed. Those rocks make it semi-enclosed. Navigation is very hard. And at one time, the Aegean was basically a very difficult sea to cross. Some of the best sailors crossed it. So, it must be stated that if Greece was to able to say that it is our fundamental right, then it would be a bit of a wrong statement. Just like Turkey, is governed by the Convention of Law of Sea, we must understand that Greece is also governed by that. Where Greece repeatedly keeps saying that, look, we have signed the law of sea, so we reserve our 12 nautical miles. It must look at Article 122 and 123 and realize that no, it cannot make a unilateral declaration like that. And it cannot do any of those things. So, in this manner, it becomes extremely important that we learn how this sea is governed, and this is basically the crux of the Aegean dispute. And I've simplified it. I've simplified it a lot. And if you would look at this video, you would understand that this is basically the entire basics of it. The rest is an addition, that they said, he said, we said, she said. All right. And as you very well know, that many CSS students, many PMS students, all of these questions, they're gonna come, because for the last year and this year, this has been a pretty hot topic. So on this point, I would like to highlight that both nations need to come together and come up with a proper solution. Turkey claiming Mavi Watan is obviously not going to sit well with Greece, and Greece claiming 12 nautical miles is not going to sit well with Turkey. They must come to a solution where the islands are demilitarized and both nations are allowed economic activity. So on this point, I would like to highlight that if you would like this video and would like more of these videos, then please leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to reach out to us or talk to us or do us more videos, then leave a comment. And I would really appreciate it if you would actually leave a comment, because talking helps. So for that, goodbye.